Let's talk some Chiefs, guys, shall we? Welcome to the Chief of the North on RGR Football. I am Seth Kaiser, the Chief of the North. And those of you who are confused about what it is I just did, Mr. Ryan White, I hope that was better. And you are trying to help me, but I'm beyond your help. You have to understand that. I'm just beyond your help. As most of you who are watching this, I would assume know, I am Seth Kaiser, Minnesota Chiefs fan. Every week, we come here to talk all things Chiefs. And this is actually kind of a special day for me. Today happened to fall exactly on the 3-year anniversary of the start of the Chief in the North newsletter. The very first article that was ever posted was just welcome to the Chief of the North newsletter, and I just wrote about the things I hope to do with it, and I include one of the more nifty throws from Patrick Mahomes in their first Super Bowl victory in Super Bowl 54 that I think flies under the radar. What makes this cool, just on a complete side note, you see how he gets Fred Warner to move just a split second. Warner's trying to bait him into this throw, but because Mahomes puts so much mustard on it, it doesn't matter, and he can't get there on time. Those are the little things that arm talent can buy you. But anyway, that's not what I'm here to talk about today. What I'm here to talk about today, we do a little bit of a mailbag every week, and this week I'm going to take a few questions from last week's mailbag, but I'm also just going to talk about sequential play calling, and corn dog, and some things that interest me from the Super Bowl, because it came up recently this week in the topics of Twitter conversation about the subject of sequential play calling and how good coaches will utilize play calls not just to try to gain yards, but to try to gain information and to try to gain edges over their opponent. So that's just something to keep in mind before we move out into that part. But first, every week, we try to answer a few mailbag questions, sometimes a lot of mailbag questions. This week, it'll be a few. If you want to have your mailbag questions prioritized, put them down here in the comments. Try to put a question mark before them, and I'll try to prioritize those. And then most weeks, I'll also tweet out for additional mailbag questions. And then we try to get through, 15, 20, 30. Sometimes I usually wax eloquent with a couple of them. So then that cuts down on our time. But we're going to do that. And then we're just going to do the questions from the comment sections. Those will always get priority. And yeah, then we'll move forward. And I also want to talk a little bit about the Chief of the North newsletter. Now, this is RGR Football. This is Ryan's platform, but I am the Chief of the North. And so I have to talk about it just a little bit. Try to just talk a little bit about what this industry is like, and what it has been like to be able to provide content directly to you. But first, let's do the content, shall we? So first and foremost, make sure you hit the like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, because Ryan and his crew here deserve it, and I'm here too. So let's get to some of the questions that we have here. The first, this was from Ryan, who, again, he's trying so hard to help me come in at the right time. I'm beyond anyone's help, Ryan. I'm sorry. He says, Seth, now that a Frank Clark return is off the table, in your opinion, would you rather the team target a different veteran age to bring in, or do what it takes to bring in D-Hop? Or is there someone else in particular you'd be interested in acquiring? If you present it as a zero-sum game there, kind of an either-or, I would prefer they bring in Hopkins as opposed to a veteran edge. And the reason for that is, while I do want them to have one more competent body on the edge, because right now you've got your presumptive starters in Amenahu and Karlaftis. Then you've got a solid rotational guy in Dana, all three of whom can rotate inside a bit. But generally speaking, you want 4 guys that you can rotate in and that can be competent, And now right now what they're counting on is FAU coming in and being a competent fourth body. That's a lot to ask of a rookie. Karlaftis was able to do it last year. I would say that while FAU has some strengths that Karlaftis doesn't have that might translate to the pass rush and pro game pretty decently, I don't think his college tape was quite as good as Karlaftis is. And so there's a real danger there in terms of expecting him to come in and be a non-weakness. That's just tough for rookies to do along the line. So I would pick Hopkins because I'm a little more comfortable with the front end talent and proven talent along the defensive line. Obviously, Jones, Dana, Amenahu, and Karlaftis, and even Wharton to a lesser extent, and even someone like Derek Nottie to a lesser extent have shown a certain floor. Whereas with the wide receiver group as it currently exists, that floor is unknown and could be terribly, terribly low. Now, hopefully it's not. Hopefully they've got a bunch of talented guys there and a few of them step up. But that floor, and we've talked about this previously, is really, really low if things don't really go the way the Chiefs are hoping in terms of Kadarius Toney's health and the development of Sky Moore and Rashee Rice being able to step right in, Richie James, all these guys. It could go a certain direction there. So that's why I would choose with Hopkins. I would choose Hopkins over that just because that would be, I think, something that would help more with the floor of the team, and the ceiling of the team is Mahomes. We all know that. Someone commented last week because I was sitting there drinking that peanut butter power, and someone said I didn't know they had scooters that far in the Great White North. And you know what? We do, and they're delicious. The peanut butter powers are unbelievable. Eric Olson asks Frank Clark or Drew Tranquill. Well, we know the answer to the question in terms of what the Chiefs have decided to do. If you're asking who I would rather have on the team for this year, for me, it partly depends on usage. If Tranquill is utilized how I'm hoping he'll be utilized, and that he kind of replaces that nickel, or not that nickel, but like that box safety kind of hybrid role that they've utilized for years. They had Sorensen do it for a while. They had Justin Reed fill in and do that for some snaps last year. They had Cook do it for other snaps. While they had Thornhill on the back end, if they're going to go to more of like kind of shell looks a little bit and not do a lot of single high, and then maybe try to keep 3 linebackers on the field or 2 linebackers on the field as opposed to the 3 safety looks, I think Tranquill has a great skill set for that and can really, really help the defense in terms of staying strong against the run, but also maintaining a lot of ability against the pass and closing down the middle of the field, which is something he did well with the Chargers. So in that sense, I think I would take Tranquill, but if they're just going to have him out there to take, 25, 30% of the snaps, then I would have taken Clark. But I'm not sure it was quite a zero-sum game like that for them. I did have a few ask here. Does anyone know what happened to the Times Ours podcast? We haven't uploaded anything in about a month. Briscoe got married. He was on his honeymoon. We had some scheduling issues this week. That'll be coming back to you next week. Grayson Neely asks, with Frank Clark going full Neil Smith, what will Veach do at defensive end? Me personally, I hope we get Hunter or Houston. I would be surprised if the Chiefs traded for Hunter. I think his contract is the issue for him. And so it would be surprising for me if he agreed to be traded to a team that didn't immediately give him a new lucrative contract. And I don't know if the Chiefs, with kind of their current build, having a couple of rookie guys at defensive end, or a rookie and a second-year player at defensive end, I don't know if that's really their long-term plans right now. And then with Justin Houston, I think the human side of all this comes into play more often than people realize. I don't think his departure from the Chiefs was particularly, I don't think it was horrifyingly acrimonious, but I also don't think it was the most, there's not a ton of great feelings there. And so I believe that probably has an effect on whether or not he'd sign here. I will say one thing, the Frank Clark going full Neil Smith. There's been a lot of comments that people make like that. I got to say, I disagree with that. He was cut. And sure, maybe the Chiefs made him an offer. Based on the comments he's made, it doesn't really sound like much of an offer got made. And it was more of a, we don't want to insult you with an incredibly low offer. And so his choices, if you can call them that, would be to, beg the Chiefs to make him a terribly low ball offer, retire, or sign with another team. And so, because, I've seen a lot of that, like, when Jamal Charles signed with the Broncos and, Derek Johnson signed with the Raiders. I mean, you really end up in that situation where this is a business. The team's job is to do what's best for the team. Ultimately, the player's job while he's on the team, his job is to do what's best for the team while he's on the field and while he's practicing. Financially, players don't owe that to the teams. It's, to me, here's the way I view it. If you look at them as employees, as people, that are doing a job, I don't count on Brant Tillis to go suit up at practice or play in the games. I count on him to make smart decisions with the salary cap because that's his job. That's the same thing. I don't count on Chris Jones to fiddle with the Chiefs salary cap because that's not his job. And so I know people have differing opinions about that, like, well, yeah, guys can take less money to help the team out. I would say that generally speaking, teams can finagle with the salary cap utilizing cash expenditures. So that's more of an owner thing than anything else. And again, it's not the player's job necessarily to build the team. That's the GM and the coach's job. So I just tend to view it like work overall. It's a weird kind of work, but because I view it like that, I don't really it doesn't bother me when guys sign with other teams. Now, if a guy, completely spurns the Chiefs, or like when Emmanuel Sanders, he agreed with the Chiefs verbally and then he went back on it. Yeah, that bugs me a little bit. Or if a guy were to choose to leave the Chiefs and then badmouth them and, whatever. Yeah, that would bother me a little bit. But a guy just choosing, hey, like even if it's not like with Clark, it sounds like there was a pretty substantial difference there. If the Chiefs offer a guy $20 million and another team offers him $25 million, I get it. $5 million is a lot of money. And over the course of a lifetime with people to care about, I think we'd mostly make the same decisions. So, man, that's probably going to get some comments. Well, either way, it's what I think. And I'm not, so I just tend to not hold that kind of thing against players because they're just people at the end of the day that are working a very lucrative, a very short career that they really need to have set them up for the rest of their lives. And probably not just them, but probably multiple members of their family as well. All right. Those are our mailbag questions. One thing I want to talk about today that kind of interested me in the conversation this week is sequential play calling. What is sequential play calling? Well, there was a really great interview this week it was with Kevin Clark and Steven Ruiz at The Ringer. They talked to George Kittle, and he said some things essentially about how there are play calls that Shanahan makes that aren't necessarily intended to gain yards that they're pretty sure will probably fail, but he needs to find out, what the opposing defense is doing. How did they handle that look? How did they handle that action? How did they handle a sweep? How did they handle, et cetera, et cetera? It's not a coincidence I said sweep. We'll come back to that. What personnel did they use? What switches did they use? What checks did they show? How did they align against it? These are all, it's just information. And so sometimes you're trying to gain information as much as you're trying to gain yards because that becomes much more important down the road. And so that's another thing, like people talk about Andy Reid's first 15 plays. They're almost always designed to take advantage of what a defense does, and he's terrific at it. But they're also designed to try to get information that will serve them for the rest of the game. And so I actually wrote about this as it relates to the Chiefs because I find it fascinating because it's yet another way in which football kind of goes beyond the box score. Because let's say a team runs 2 or 3 plays like that in the first half, and all of them fail to gain a single yard, whether it's a pass play or run play. Statistically speaking, those plays later on will negatively affect the quarterback or the running back or the wide receiver's EPA per play, or their more basic stats. All of those things will be affected by that, and it'll look like they were operating inefficiently. But if it was done to set up something really great down the road, like a big play or a big play at an important time, then even though it wasn't technically the most efficient thing to do in the moment, long term, it is the more efficient thing to do. Think of it as, sacrificing, your bishop to be able to have positioning to take someone else's queen. I'm not really a great chess player, but sometimes you have to give up something to get something. And even if that something is positioning or information. And so with that in mind, does everyone remember the time that Kadarius Toney waltzed into the end zone more wide open right here than any player has any right to be in any football game, let alone at the highest level in the biggest stage against a great defense? Well, of course, you all remember that. We all know Corn Dog. We've all talked about it extensively. Here's what's interesting to me. I actually wrote about this. You can check it out on the Chief of the North, mnchiefsfan.substack.com. I wrote about kind of some of the things that happened previously in the game that set this up. This was a previous goal line drive goal line, not stand, but the Chiefs have the ball in the red zone. They're near the goal line. And you notice right here, they've got Sky Moore coming across the formation with a similar style action, like a jet sweep. And the very next play, same thing. They have Sky Moore run across, then they have him run across again a little bit before the snap this time. But the Eagles don't know that, right? They have to think the snap is occurring. And now in both these plays, you can see the movement of the players. You can see that the way the Eagles have chosen to handle this is not necessarily to run across the formation, but to switch, right? So whether they're playing man or zone, they're trying to basically alter their defense in order to account for where Sky Moore is going, whether that's with a switch. Well, it's with a switch in both of these situations. So here's something that's interesting to me. I actually went back and I took a look at the film for the rest of the Super Bowl, and they ran a jet sweep action 9 different times. prior to running corn dog to Tony. And 9 different times they had, it was usually more, run across the formation. Once they handed it off to him, once they utilized that same motion to kind of try to fool the defense and to come to the other side, and then hand it up to Pacheco, moving the opposite direction. It's a nice play call. It builds off a previous tendency. They generally would hand the ball off here, and they rarely were going the opposite direction throughout the season. But Andy Reid was on one in the Super Bowl, just on a side note. Oh, which I didn't show it to you. Here it is. That was a funny, hey, Seth's getting old moment. And so you see here, they've got more running a jet sweep motion, which you'll see as soon as it restarts. Runs the jet sweep motion, tries to clear out at least one defender and get other guys moving the wrong way. Pacheco picks up a big chunk of yards. And so they had also motioned their boundary receiver back towards the pack, back towards the formation 4 different times. And not at any of those times did they send them running back, either before the snap or after. So you saw all that, and the way I wrote that here, 13 times they'd use an action that had looked similar, and that included multiple plays in a row at the goal line. And all of that is not just to move the ball, but to gather information and, in theory, lull the high-level defense. See, now I'm just reading the article to you at this point. But it's to try to get them into a sense of complacency about their switches, about their checks. Hey, we've got this handled. When Moore did run a jet sweep, they did a great job against it. They hadn't given up any big plays to it other than that Pacheco run, really. And the result you get is this. Reid and company, they had an opportunity to see exactly how the Eagles were handling it and then call a play to exploit just that. And there's not an Eagle within 10 yards of Tony there. And then one thing that's interesting to me, so Tony scores the touchdown. Every Chiefs fan knows what happens next, right? The Chiefs manage to force a punt. Tony makes a great return. And the Chiefs are set up, I think inside the 5-yard line. The very first play, they actually ran Sky Moore on another jet sweep action just to show the same thing they'd showed the rest of the game, while the previous corn dog play was still in the mind of the Eagles defenders. And so it's just another example of understanding how things work sequentially. And Andy Reid's great about that. Understanding, okay, they just saw us mix things up. They're still probably trying to get those checks in order, trying to figure out how to avoid that happening again. We're going to show them a jet sweep again. And then, of course, the very next play, after showing Sky Moore running a jet sweep, here he starts. They look like they're planning on switching off again. There's a massive miscommunication there. And Sky Moore is somehow even more open than Kadarius Toney was. And I mean, really, that's not great analysis, but it is accurate because it's hilarious. And so I wanted to write about that just to kind of give people an idea of sequential play calling. And you can see that with all sorts of things. You see plays unfolding. There's only so many ways you can line up, but you can see variants of different plays unfolding one after another. I don't know, a quick fullback handoff eventually unfolds into a pitch to the running back and eventually unfolds into a play action fake to a throw outside on a version that looks kind of like an RPO, but isn't. And that eventually unfolds into the same look, the fake handoff to the fullback, the fake throw to the outside, and then a throw to the slant over the middle, or then to the sideline that the running back has ran over to. There's all this unfolding that occurs. And that's something just to keep in mind when you're looking at every single play call. When you're wondering why next time, and I do think he does this too much, why next time in like a 2nd and 8, they're running a slow developing draw out of shotgun to Isaiah Pacheco that gains 2 yards. I'm not saying every time they do that, that's correct. It drives me crazy. And Andy Reid's not omniscient. He's just like everyone else. He makes mistakes. But there is a possibility that what they're trying to see is how the defense reacts. And that way they can try to exploit it later on. And the Super Bowl just contains such a great example of this. So it's just something I want everyone to keep in mind when they're watching those things. And just because it's fun to watch for that stuff, because if you're watching for it, you'll see it when it happens. When you say, hey, wait a minute, that was an unfolding of something they did in the first quarter. And it's really fun to recognize those things. If you're anything like me, the more you learn about football, the more you love it. So to close this off here, I've only got a few more minutes left because I always start to talk way too much. This article also contains kind of a thank you. We've got 3 years of the Chief of the North newsletter, over 350 articles. This was my 354th one. When I started the Chief of the North newsletter, I just said I wanted it to be, the sort of coverage that you've hopefully come to expect from me without having to worry about clickbait or search engine optimization or anything like that. when I wrote that, when I started the Chief of the North newsletter, I've talked about this a little bit before. I intended on it to be kind of a side project, something in addition to what I was doing with the Athletic at the time. And instead, it's become my primary outlet for written content. By far, it's something that I pour a ton of time and energy into. That where I've in 3 years I've written 350 plus articles, and the whole reason for that is because of you guys. And I said it in writing, but I wanted to take an opportunity to say it like this because I think that thank yous and things that are sincere lose a little bit of their import or impact in written format. And I can just say that because of your guys' support, weeks like this week where really good people were laid off at the Athletic, people that are great at their jobs, and we've seen layoffs in other industries as well. That rather than that being something that affects my life in an incredibly direct way, instead it's something that I see and that it's sad, but it's also something I can advise people that maybe you can do something about this. The sports content industry is a weird one, and it's one where the best content, at least the best content in my opinion, doesn't always rise to the top. And it's so competitive, and there's so many people out there willing to do it for free to get their foot in the door. And then once you get to the higher levels of the industry, there's so much that goes into how things can become profitable. And there's a reason why clickbait and arguing shows and hot takes flourish, because that's what generates revenue. And you guys, because I've never had to do that. I have never had to write about something that I didn't want to write about, or sell out, even like the lists that I do are lists that I find interesting. I've just never had to do that. And I would have never dreamed that I could even dream about this being what I do one day. And every year it becomes a little more in sight that maybe one day this is what I do. Maybe it's all I do. And I get to even dream those dreams because of you guys. And I get to, I talk a lot about, hey, visit Anna Maria. It's awesome. You visit Florida. So, one of the reasons I was able to take a little time off and go somewhere with my family is because of your support. And I will never know how to thank people for trusting me to give me money and trust me to give you something in return that you'll appreciate. And so I just wanted to say thank you for your trust and for your support. Some of you have been reading stuff that I've written for 12, 13 years. And it's an incredible gift. And I will never, ever take it for granted. And so I just wanted to say from me to you guys, thank you for 3 years of just the best job. This job was so much fun before, but now it's even more fun. And I just thank you guys so much. And so with that, we've come to the end of this particular time. Be back next week. Make sure to put any mailbag questions you have in the comments below, and I'll be sure to prioritize those. We'll be back to talk Chiefs. It'll be a lot of fun. I just appreciate you guys deeply. It is a terrific, terrific week to be a Chiefs fan. Thank you guys.